So we are live now on LinkedIn and Instagram, hopefully, and you can see us. So hello to everyone. My name is Antje. I'm head of communications here at the EU Delegation, and I'm also responsible for the traineeship program. And I have Lair and Dorothea with me, and they're going to tell you a little bit about their experience here as trainees. I first just wanted to quickly say something about the conditions of the internship and how you can apply. We have currently a call out for September session, so you can still apply until this Sunday, Sunday midnight, for an internship, for a traineeship in a section in all of our sections: humanitarian, human rights, disarmament, economic affairs, health, and social affairs. And we are looking basically for approximately 5 to 7 trainees. And the conditions for it is that you have to be a member of the European Union, a citizen of the European Union, or a citizen of the host country. So for us, that means we are in Switzerland, and we can also accept Swiss students. If you come from a non-EU country, I would advise you then to look into if there's an EU delegation in your country, and then you can still apply for that specific delegation. Otherwise, the traineeship is paid. We pay 1,300 euros a month, which Lair and Dorothea can then tell you afterwards if it's feasible to live on this. But I think it's, it is a solid stipend for traineeship. Traineeships are usually 4 to 6 months, and they start always in September, October, and then the next session would be in March, February, March. And one of the other conditions is that you, if you want to apply, you shouldn't have done already a traineeship with any European Union institution. So if you've done, for example, a traineeship with the European Parliament already, or with the European Commission, then unfortunately you're not eligible if that has been longer than 6 weeks. If it's been less than 6 weeks, so it was kind of a school traineeship that you did, then it's okay. But everything longer than 6 weeks, unfortunately, you can only do one traineeship with an EU institution. So choose it wisely. And if you want to apply with us, we'll give you some more insights of how to do that. One other thing is that in terms of work experience, we are really looking for young graduates. So people are not allowed to have more than 1 year of full-time professional work experience after their graduation. And that means after the bachelor studies. So I always, that's one of the things I always say is, of course, you want to show yourself in the CV with lots of experience, and it's definitely good to have some experience. And I think Lair and Dorothea will tell you that they already have some previous work experience. But please don't overdo it and overstate things, because otherwise we might not be able to, we'll see your CV and you think, oh, that person has already done 2-3 years of work experience, and then we might not select you because of that, even though you might have done voluntary work or part-time student work, and then it's okay. If you've done part-time student work for the last 3 years, it's totally fine. You can apply, and that rule of 1 year work experience will not apply to you. So please mark that in your CV and say it's been an unpaid traineeship or voluntary work, it's been a part-time job next to your studies. That's all something that we appreciate very much. The only thing is that we cannot accept people who have done after the bachelor's, for example, over 1 year of really full-time professional jobs. So that's basically the introduction I wanted to give you. And now we'll turn to Lair and Dorothea. And maybe you can just both present yourself a little bit and say which section you work in, and also a bit about your background, because I think probably some of the other applicants will wonder what kind of profile are they looking for here.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I'm Leire. I work in the human rights section, and I arrived in March. And regarding my background, I did a double bachelor's in law and international relations in Bilbao, in Spain, because I'm from Spain. I didn't say that. But and then I did my master's in the University of Amsterdam in public international law. And I have some experience. But yeah, like a lot of it is working in law clinics and research, some volunteering, work with NGOs in migration, in like more environmental and social socio-environmental issues. So yes, I'm very geared towards the human rights area, but it's true that when coming here, I didn't have any full-time work experience before. And yeah, that's basically it.
Okay.
Yeah, hi. My name is Dorothea. I'm from Germany originally, and I'm working in the humanitarian and migration section here. And my background is I did a bachelor's degree in international relations at the London School of Economics in the UK. And then right after my bachelor's, did a master's in humanitarian policy and Middle Eastern studies at Columbia in the US. And I also had a little bit of work experience coming into this. So right before actually starting this traineeship, I was working as a research assistant with the innovation team of the German Red Cross. And I also worked as a research assistant during my master studies on a migration project. And I think that I did my master's thesis in cooperation with OCHA, so the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs. So there's a really strong background both in humanitarian and in migration work, which is why I applied, and also why I think this was such a good fit, because the section really lies exactly at the intersection of my interests.
So maybe you can say a little bit about how the recruitment process was, because I know that each section also has their specific requirements, and clearly, I mean, you are geared towards the section that you applied for. And this is actually one thing I forgot to mention in the beginning, is you can only apply for one section. Please, when you send in your application, mark it in the subject line, really which section you apply for, so that it's clear, because we get a lot of applications, of course, and it's much easier than for us, because each section recruits actually their own, so they look individually at the CVs, and this is why you can only apply for one, also that we don't end up with the same candidates in the various sections. So
Yeah, I mean, I can start this time if you want me to. I think application process. I wrote a cover letter. I adapted my CV a bit. And I think like the point Antje was making earlier about the 1 year of work experience is quite important, because I am one of those people. I've always worked part-time somewhere, and technically, if you looked at my CV, you could assume that maybe I have 3 years of work experience, but that's not necessarily, like, so much of that was part-time or volunteering, and there were obviously always breaks in between. So I think I really highlighted, I think actually in the first line of my cover letter, that I do have a combined year of work experience. And then the application process went really well. I wrote a cover letter. I really highlighted both my experience and my interest, and why I think that it's a good fit. So I really leaned into the fact that I felt like this traineeship lay at the nexus of my interest, and that it was both going to be valuable for them to hire me, but also going to be valuable for me to get that experience. So I think having that dual aspect, I felt like, I really highlighted that, and I think that was quite important. And then after I sent the cover letter, I don't remember the exact timeline, but it was definitely quite a few weeks later, I think, I received an email inviting me for an interview, and I then interviewed for the position. It was a 20-minute interview, I believe, with 2 of the people who are part of my team, and I was asked a number of questions. Was asked to give quite concise, 2-minute answers, and then after the interview, actually, I think the next day was invited for a written test, and I think that is something that I know the humanitarian and migration section does, but from speaking to other trainees, I haven't really heard that other sections do this. So I was then asked to do a 4-hour written test where
4 hours, okay.
Yes, 4 hours. I know, quite the commitment, I thought, but where I basically completed a task. So I basically wrote a report similar to the ones that I would be writing during my job here. So, and I did that, and the next day got a very nice call offering me the traineeship, and then accepted it the week later. So I think from beginning of the interview, a week later, I had my offer. So that was a really quick process, but it took a while until I got the interview. So there was
I think that was also the Christmas break for you. So I think in that sense, it actually took a little bit longer, because the application was the end of December, was in December.
Yeah, exactly.
And then there was a Christmas break in between. I think this time around, we will be a little bit faster, because we have to finish up everything, all the recruitment process before the summer break, before colleagues go on holidays. So you'll be, this one will be quite fast. But so you didn't do the written written test?
No, yeah, like I actually like same, like I also had a pretty easy choice in the human rights because I've always been like really geared towards human rights. All the master's and bachelor's thesis has always been in the same direction. So yeah, I also like wrote a cover letter. And yeah, regarding the cover letter, my advice would be maybe to like really tie it in and like a temporal line between your past, your future, and your like the actual present work that you want to do at the traineeship. So yeah, like really draw a line between like to make it seem like you have like a plan where this is a really important part of it. You know, to see a sense of direction. I think this is something that's really well appreciated when recruiters and specifically at the EU delegation, they see that you have like a sense of direction, that you know this makes sense for you, and that of course you want to explore the area, but also you have a specific purpose within it. And another thing that I did highlight in my application, which in my cover letter, which I think in the specifically in the human rights section might be important, is that of course human rights are a really broad topic. There's a lot of thematic areas. There's a lot of different regions in the world for human rights. And I think it's, in my case, I've been specialized in specific countries and specific issues, but I think it's important to do a balance between your more general interest in human rights as a field and as a concept, and your more specific interest, because then within the human rights section, they have different fields of interest that you might fit into. So that might also be interesting regarding the interview and like your specific orientation within human rights. And then like, yeah, like I also like got the call for the interview like within like a few weeks, because of course the Christmas break happened. And yeah, like my interview was really nice. It was 2 team members, and then like also like the head of section. And like it was really, really nice. The questions were quite, they were like all the time, they were trying to make me feel comfortable and free to answer like regarding like my orientation. It was pretty broad questions, and also situational questions, like about have you ever had a situation where this happened and how do you handle it? And yeah, like then I got the answer like within less than a week. And like yeah, it was also really a nice email from the head of section, and then from like the admin person as well, super nice. And yeah, like I mean overall, I didn't have a written test as well, as you were mentioning. I know from previous interns that maybe sometimes in the human rights section it might happen that there's a written test, but in my case I don't know why it didn't happen. But yeah, yeah, overall I think it's a really specifically the interview was really nice. I felt like I was having a nice conversation about my interests rather than just like...
Yeah, I mean, I think as a recruiter, and I mean, I recruit, of course, quite a lot of trainees as well. One thing on the letter of motivation, I think you're totally right to, you know, to link it from your experience, but also from what the EU delegations you're doing. I always give the advice to only really look at not writing too long letters. I mean, a page is really enough. Otherwise, it's getting also too long for recruiters to actually to read all of those, because we get hundreds and hundreds of these letters. And then I think the interviews depend sometimes. I mean, on the written test. I mean, it depends also on the quality of the candidates. Sometimes we have, you know, you see that you have several ones which are pretty much the same, and then you might want to do a written test just to confirm who to take. Sometimes it's very obvious in the interviews, and then maybe you just go with our first choice. I, for example, personally also do reference calls, so I would call up from the last candidates the previous references. So that's also something that some colleagues might do. But yeah, all of this it will happen in a way that once I think the stage of coming to the invitation for the interview is actually the big stage. So this is where we do really a big pre-selection, because we have so many candidates. And then the interviews are usually, of course, you have much higher chances of being accepted, because we might have only interview 5 candidates, and we will take 1 or 2 depending on the section. And then usually we go fast. I think this, as I said, this summer break will force us to go fast to have basically the answer in July. So the deadline is 2nd of June. My colleagues will look at all the CVs in June, and probably by after 2-3 weeks you will already get you will be contacted. It's only those who actually get the invitation to the interview who will be contacted, because it's difficult for all of us to reply to the hundreds of applications. So if you haven't heard of us by mid-July, that probably means that you haven't been invited to the next round. So maybe you just want to talk a little bit about what you actually do in your daily job and how you like it.
Maybe you want to go ahead?
Sure, why not? I mean, I'm really enjoying myself. I didn't say it earlier, but I started mid-March, so a little like 2 weeks after you. So I've been here for 2.5 months now, which is basically like the midpoint of my traineeship. And I cover a couple. I think the main work we do here, which may be important to state first, is that we cover meetings and then basically write reports on them, which we then send to the team members who attend the meetings with us, who then send it to Brussels. So it's really about basically going to those meetings and trying to figure out what information is important, and to write reports, and they're formal reports and less formal, like email readouts, for example, and then we send that information back, right? So there's a lot of writing involved and a lot of note taking, definitely. And for me, I cover the International Committee of the Red Cross, UNHCR, IOM, and OCHA, as well as a range of NGOs. So I actually just got back from a roundtable discussion on the protection of civilians in armed conflict hosted by the German mission here. So it's really quite varied. There is, I find the topics really interesting. It's really nice to both attend maybe, I don't know, like a special session on how IOM is being reformed one day, quite technical, and then the next day you have an expert level briefing with people who just came back from Gaza, let's say. I've had a lot of briefings by the Danish Refugee Council, the Norwegian Refugee Council, Doctors Without Borders, so NGOs who are really on the ground and then send country teams back here to update us on what's happening in the country.
Then you also go to the Palais, I guess.
Yes, exactly. So that's so specifically, I think I go a lot less to Palais than you do, but for me, so OCHA obviously hosts their monthly briefing at the UN Palais. Then I had, for example, a high-level donor briefing on, a high-level pledging conference, on the situation in Ethiopia. So there's a lot of, it's really varied, I think, and it's quite, and I really enjoy the fact that it's also both the migration and the humanitarians, since they're obviously so closely linked. And I attend, I write briefing notes. I meet with my supervisors to kind of discuss what we thought of these events. So it's really nice. We also discuss maybe what this could mean for our delegation here. So it's quite nice, because you spend of course you do really have that big chunk of the work that is report writing, but you also it's not. There's also so much around that, so much discussion. I also, So
and you feel integrated in your team.
Absolutely, I really do. And I also feel if, for example, we write assessments with certain reports, if there's something that I notice and I bring it up with my team member, there can definitely be a productive discussion around these things, So that's not, I don't at all feel like I'm just providing output, but rather do really feel like I'm a valued member of the team, which I think is really nice. And
there, of course, you spent day and night at the Human Rights Council, which now the session is over, but it's going to start again.
I got here in March, the 1st of March, so I was already 1 week into the Human Rights Council, and I got here, so it kind of got parachuted into the Human Rights Council. Of course, I had a lot of nice guidance and welcoming by the team, but also I got here at a really intense point of the work of the human rights section, and that was super exciting. Of course, as a starting point, really a lot of adjusting, but for the human rights team, it really goes in waves, because there's a Human Rights Council 3 times a year. In my case, I'm going to cover both the March section that I already did and now the June-July session. So it's really nice to be able to have some experience from the previous one to go to the next one.
I think the next person, of course, who's now watching, they're going to see the September session and maybe the preparation then for the Human Rights Council. In February, March.
So there's in the human rights section a lot of intensity when you are doing the Human Rights Council. So you spend all the days at the Palais, you're barely in the office, you're really reporting really intensely and meeting not only of course in the formal debates at the Human Rights Council, but also with a lot of special procedures, special rapporteurs, fact-finding mechanisms, NGOs, etc. and both in like bigger negotiations, maybe with all the member states and the EU, and also maybe like with just some officials that you want to meet in more informal meetings. So that's really nice to be able to have like more like, I mean, of course, you go with your supervisor. I don't go alone in my capacity as a trainee, but like you really get to like be more integrated, maybe in like more detailed discussions that are like really nice in contrast with more like broader statements in the general debates that sometimes you get a bit like lost in the whole situation. Of course, there's a lot of reporting involved, as Thea said, indeed. And I mean, for the human rights section, it's also really, you get to really observe the dynamics between the different countries, the different topics. So you really get, at the end, like a sense and an ability to quickly detect where the critical issues are and where you should focus on when you're in a debate. So that's a really nice ability that I think you can really perfect during the internship, the traineeship, so to really like just, yeah, like to go into a room when there's a debate on a certain country or a certain issue and like really quickly get a grip of the different actors, who you should be paying attention to, what the different words that you're going to be hearing are, that you should take into account. And then in intersessional periods, like exactly at this point now, we also do a lot of work. For example, last week I was in the negotiations for the Declaration on the Rights of People of African Descent in Palais Wilson, so a different palais this time. And it's also really interesting because there's a lot of working groups, a lot of committees. Like there's still a lot of work to do during the intersessional periods. It's not the same intensity, of course, but I think that as well, like the human rights section is also really varied in terms of the work that
I think actually all sections are probably quite diverse at the end of the day. I mean, that's the beauty also of our work here, and I think at the EU delegation in Geneva is that it covers so many different topics. And so basically now I wanted to also see, I have my trainee, my communications trainee Clémence, who's behind the scenes here. And I wanted to see if there's any questions already. So please, if you have questions, put them in the chat on LinkedIn and on Instagram, and we can see them, and Clémence can then relay them to us. So Clémence, anything?
Yes, so we have a first question regarding the applications. How many applications do you normally receive?
We receive quite a lot. I mean, normally it's probably around 600 for maybe 10 positions. But then I must admit, when I see, for example, the applications for my section, I mean, the number sounds so big, and it's kind of like, you might think like, oh my God, why would I actually apply for this? But then when I go down and I actually see the candidates who are really qualified, who fulfill all the criteria, it goes already down. So I think I wouldn't be afraid of taking this number too. I mean, you know, it's a big number, but it doesn't mean that you cannot make it, as you can see here. So.
Thank you for this answer. We also have another question regarding the flexibility of the starting dates.
Yeah, so I mean, it depends a little bit on the sections. Normally, we always say September to somehow January, February, March, depending also a little bit on the budget. And then the next session starts in February, March. But for example, the disarmament section has a completely different timeline, because their busiest period, contrary to all of us, is in August. And so they recruit actually interns in a different way. And I think you might have seen that when you apply for the disarmament traineeship. And in terms of flexibility, otherwise, I mean, we are a bit flexible, but normally we do have, if you know that the Human Rights Council starts, so we know that, I don't know, now in September there's going to be a big conference of the IFRC and the ICRC. We do need the trainees to be in place, so there's not that much juggle room from that position.
Thank you. We also have a question from Laura Fernandez, who asked if the money granted from the traineeship is enough to live in Geneva. And also she asked if the traineeship includes housing.
So there's no housing allowance or something. I mean, the stipend, the 1,300 are what you get, basically. And you would have to find your own accommodation with that. I know, of course, and we all know, Geneva is not the cheapest place, that's for sure. And I think it also depends. I mean, we always try to help our trainees in terms of connecting with the former trainees so that they can see if they can maybe even get, their place. Some trainees live in neighboring France. Some trainees live here in Geneva. And I think it also depends a little bit what you find in terms of your budget. So maybe you can say a little bit more about that. For this September session, unfortunately, it's always that the trainees normally leave, your round of trainees normally leaves in July. So then we cannot relay the living situation normally because, that's, I think for the March session, it's a little bit easier because people basically give them there's no time in between the two traineeships. But maybe you can say a little bit about it. I mean, given that Geneva is an expensive place, of course, there's many agencies or many places here who don't pay at all. And I think there's a big discussion on traineeship, and we have been trying to adapt a stipend which is feasible, but of course it is really an expensive city.
Yeah. So, I mean, regarding the housing, I think that Geneva, is not a super easy place to find a house. So I think that, I would recommend to start looking right away. And maybe even for the former trainees, maybe it's even worth it to contact them just to see how they looked for it, for the house. Even if you cannot take their housing specifically, maybe they can get some tips. There's a lot of WhatsApp groups. There's a lot of movement regarding housing for trainees because it's not easy, but then there's a lot of resources as well.
Yeah, and there's a lot of change, of course, because people change all the time. So I think in that sense, there is offer.
Yeah.
Also, is there? Yeah, feel free to also
I think Dorothea still wanted to say something about the
just quickly. No, I think it's. I think it is really appreciated that this traineeship is paid, and I think there is there are a lot of internships. I would say maybe even the majority which aren't paid in Geneva, and that's obviously a really difficult situation. I think that if I look at if I'm just thinking I think that some trainees. I think the lowest that I've kind of heard that people are paying for housing is 600 a month.
Yeah,
but that's really on the low end. I think the more realistic version for most people is between 800 and 1,000, something like that. And I think if you pay 1,000, it's obviously hard to live off 1,300. In my case, I still have some money saved to my previous job, which is tying me over a bit. But I do think that is the reality for most of us to some extent. I think it's hard to live. I think, being honest, it's hard to just live on the 1,300, but I do know that there are some trainees who are really able to find quite cheap housing who are able to do it. Yeah. But I think it's not, it's maybe not always the most realistic option for So I just think that it's important to, but I think at the same time, it is, it's good that it is paid. And I think you are able to make it work, maybe in some situations better than in others.
Yeah, and it's really exceptional. As Thea said, it's really exceptional within Geneva. We meet a lot of interns, and most of them are paid substantially less than we are, or even zero. So that's already a win for us, of course.
Yeah. And I think the trainee, and you can maybe say a little bit about that afterwards as well, because it always comes up as well how the life as a trainee is in terms of there are and need a lot of trainees and interns here in Geneva, and I think it's a nice network as well. So maybe you can say something about that. But maybe there's some other questions.
Yes, definitely. There is another question regarding the motivational letter and full-time job experience. How do you exactly talk about your experience, especially when you have only a part-time and not a full-time job?
You can just tell in your CV that this is a part-time job, and then you describe your job the same way as you would do with a full-time job. It's just that you really say there's been a part-time job, a part-time student job, but of course it's still it's very valuable, and given the high amount of CVs that we get, if you have no previous experience, if you haven't done any traineeship or part-time student jobs, etc., it'll be difficult for you to be recruited in this position, I must admit. So it does really value. It does give another value to your CV. You just have to be honest with it, and clearly we don't expect trainees to have a 10-year experience and to have seen it all. Otherwise, you wouldn't be a trainee. Then you could just apply for our jobs. So I don't think you need to overdo it and overstate it. Clearly, a traineeship is something that it's a learning experience for young graduates, but it does help indeed to show that you've already some experience in maybe not completely the same, but in kind of similar areas. And it also shows, of course, that you're interested in this area, because for us as a recruiter, we do like to see that it's not a random application, but that it really is makes sense for you, but also for us, because it's someone who's really interested in this area.
And also, as a recruiter, what would you say is the top criterion you look for a perfect candidate?
The top criteria, I mean, for me personally, I must admit, of course, I mean, the previous work experience counts a lot, because it helps me seeing that this person, because we do ask our trainees to really be part of the team, and I think that's a nice thing that you are part of the team, but it also means that we expect also a little bit in giving back. So the work experience is definitely something which is very high on the agenda. For me personally, I also always look at the letter of motivation in terms of if that is individualized. That means sometimes I get letters where I already see that they just changed the name of the organization and it's a complete empty. It's not geared. So that for me, for example, is also a no-go, because it just shows that it's one of the 100 applications that has been sent around, and it's not necessarily with your heart that you apply to this position. I also personally don't like if people are completely over the top in terms of setting themselves too much and not having a little bit of a humble attitude and think that they can, they think they need to prove that they can already do a full-time policy officer job, which is not the case. Yeah. So I think being humble and showing that you are a young graduate who's now entering the job market is more honest, and for me also something which I appreciate actually, and not trying to sell yourself as someone who has seen the world already and who has done a lot of, who has already a lot of experience.
We also have someone who asks if you need a diploma in international relations to be accepted, or if it can be balanced between professional and volunteer opportunities and experiences.
I mean, we need a bachelor's degree minimum. Some of the sections also ask for masters, depending on the section. But you need at least a bachelor's degree. It doesn't have to be in international relations. It depends. I mean, I think you studied law. What you studied?
Yeah, international relations and humanitarian policy.
Exactly. So I mean, others in my area, for example, study communication. So it depends. I mean, our health section we also had people studying medicine and having a degree in medicine. So it really depends on the section.
Thank you very much. We also have a question regarding the applications. If you have any red flags that you commonly see.
I mean, I think I listed them a little bit. The red flags are definitely too much work experience. Of course, often we still get applications from people who are not who are not fulfilling the criteria. Meaning, for example, they don't have the EU citizenship or the Swiss citizenship in our case. So that is immediately, unfortunately, then selected, they cannot be selected, but then they're put aside. Otherwise, for me, it's also a red flag to have mistakes in your letter and in your CV. I mean, not often, but I do regularly see CVs where, for example, there's a lot of grammar mistakes, and also letter of motivations. And I personally think that it should be worth having someone. And I mean, we're all not native speakers, and that's fine. But I think we should put the effort in. If you send in an application, that you have it double checked, and you don't send something with mistakes. Or, for example, I get letters then where it says I apply for, and then it's a completely different organization, and clearly they just didn't bother to change the title, at least in for the delegation. So these are kind of the red flags when I see that it's really a little bit floppy and not very serious.
And also, what is the expectation after the traineeship? Are trainees usually hired as permanent after the experience?
No, that's something which is important indeed to say, is that there's usually not a possibility at the EU delegation to continue. And of course, for the EU institutions, when you want to work for the EU institution, you normally have to pass the EBSO concourse, and it's a different pathway. So normally our trainees, I mean, I think they are well connected afterwards, and we try to help where we can. But it's not a position where you can be hired really afterwards. But we do have a lot of trainees who immediately afterwards apply and get some positions in other organizations, be it NGOs or at the UN, or they go back to their home country in some way. Others also apply then for the foreign ministry, for example, and they apply for the European Union and go through the different selection processes there.
We also have a question from someone who asked for experience. You want to have like precisions regarding the experience that is needed because he only has internships in his curriculum vitae.
Yeah, but I mean, internships are perfect for us. I mean, as I said, we can't really, if you've done too much work experience, if you have too much work experience, that's not good. So traineeships are very much appreciated, but they don't block us in terms of hiring you as a young graduate. So that's fully okay. You don't have to have already 5 years of experience, and you're not even allowed to have that.
Also, for the health section, do you need a health background? Or is it enough if you have only a low degree or an interest in health policy?
I think the important thing is that you can show that you have some interest and maybe also a little bit of expertise via your studies in it. You don't necessarily have to be a doctor. You don't have to have a doctor's degree or like studied medicine for the health section. I think that's rather the exception. I don't know what our current health trainee is as a background. Do you know?
Yeah, one of them, there are two actually right now.
Yeah.
One of them has a master's in public health, and the other one has a master's in international law.
Okay,
So
yeah. So it's varied, yeah.
Thank you. And also, final question. Someone missed the beginning of the live. How can you have access to it?
And we're going to post it afterwards on LinkedIn and on Instagram, so you can watch it again. Okay, so maybe just one other word in terms of social life in Geneva to end this up on a nice way.
I mean, the social life is quite good because there's a nice intern environment. There's so many I don't know, hundreds of people that have similar interests to you or different, but from different organizations, and it really is a feeling of kind of Erasmus in the sense that you get to meet many people. For me, especially during the Human Rights Council, I got to interact with so many different interns, and also of course more experts and diplomats that also are super nice to meet and to exchange views with. And regarding the social life, of course, as we said, it's an expensive city, but you also get to do a lot of nice plans
Yeah, I mean, no, I would really agree with all of that. I think the social life is really nice and really fulfilling. And there's also, I think right now we're about 12 trainees or maybe 1, 2 more. And there's a really nice community. We do things together. And I think it's also quite, there's so many, there are actually quite a few different things you can do in Geneva. We've been going on weekend hikes for the last couple of weekends. So
every weekend.
So that's really nice. Maybe doing something a bit different, but then people obviously also go out for drinks or right now we're so lucky going to the lake, being able to swim. It's obviously wonderful. So I think that there's there's a really good social life, and it's really, I think it's also a really big part of the traineeship, right? It's not
definitely.
just the work you do, but also the experience you have here in Geneva with the other trainees. So
Okay. Well, thank you so much for that testimony. And so if you have any more questions, you can always drop us a line on LinkedIn, for example, a personal message, and we normally try to reply quite fast. So thank you so much for watching. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.